Welcome to the show. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I am back from Idaho. I went to Idaho over the weekend. I actually had to go there a little bit later last week because my uncle passed away right at the beginning of the pandemic, so February of 2020. And we just now were finally able to host his celebration of life. So Idaho had, limited gatherings to maybe at some points 20 people or 50 people. And I in my family alone, I have 20 first cousins. So you could imagine that, with the 21st cousins and then, of course, the aunts and the uncles, and then a lot of my cousins have children, just immediate family for my uncle would have been over 50 people. So we had to wait in order to be able to include his many numerous friends and other family members, the rest of the extended family, in order to host a celebration of life. And so we were able to do that this weekend, and I was very busy putting it all together, getting him, all set up, and we had to do the funeral, the graveside service, which he was cremated, so we buried his urn, and then we did a big celebration of life, and it was nice being back in Boise. But one thing really, really struck me that I want to talk to you about tonight. So there's this notion in America right now that we are a racist country, right? We hear this all the time from the news media. And social media and just people in our lives, right? They've all kind of gobbled up this idea that we are this fundamentally racist country, that we have not progressed from slavery and segregation, which just seems obviously insane because obviously we have progressed quite a bit from those times. And that we still have a lot of work to do, which is true. We always could evolve and progress and get better. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt that we could always improve and be better. And there's, of course, bigots out there. There are, of course, people who kind of depends on your term of racist, right? When they say, because you hear this all the time, that white people can't be racist. That you can't be racist against white people, right? We hear this all the time. You can't be racist against white people. They can't experience racism. And then you say, why? And they say, well, because whites are in the position of power. And since they're in the position of power, they cannot experience racism because racism is inherently somebody in a position of power exerting that power over you in some way because of their race. So it's only the powerful who are able to be racist. And then that always drives me to this kind of, when you then say, okay, have you ever met a white supremacist? Have you ever met like an actual racist in your life? Because I never have met anybody that was blatantly, obviously that racist. Bigots, okay, right? You got your old grandpa, or your uncle, or the person that was, just from a different generation and a different era. And they say things, they make remarks that are maybe phobic in some way, whether it be somebody's sexuality or even gender. They might be misogynistic or they might be bigoted against people from different countries or different color skin, right? But are they in a position of power? Right? I always have to ask that. Are they in a position of power? Because if racism is only somebody who's in a position of power who then can somehow wield it over you, then really is like Billy Bob in the backwoods of Idaho. Does he have some kind of power over you that if he says something bigoted or racist or bigoted against you, that now makes him somehow having some sort of authority and power over your life? Because in my experience, that guy who's living out in the middle of the country in places like Idaho or not as much Idaho, and I'm going to get to that, and places, in the backwoods of places where people say, oh, they're flying the Confederate flag and they're all big Trump supporters and they're a bunch of racists. And then you say, well, does that guy have any power over you or your life? And obviously the answer, I think, to that is no, that person doesn't. They're of absolutely no consequence to your life. But nonetheless, right? So we hear this huge conversation all the time about racism. And what was so amazing to me being back in Idaho was I was able to see all of my cousins because of the funeral. And I have one cousin in particular. So I have always been the mixed race person in my family. Everybody's white on my Idaho side of the family. It's from my dad's side. My dad grew up on a farm in Weiser, Idaho, to Danish family. So everybody's really white. And I have one cousin. And I'm the only one that was mixed. My dad married my mom, had me. I'm the only one. And then my cousin, she married a black man and had a couple of half white, half black kids. So I have cousins that are half. And then I have another cousin now who's he just had a couple of kids with a woman. She's Latino, and so now we have a couple of, but they're really young. So I go to my aunt and uncle's house and to visit, and they're the grandparents of the two kids that are half white and half black. And I'm looking at the fridge, all the family photos. They've got everybody up there who sends them pictures. And one thing that I noticed as I honed in on these two boys, their elementary school classes. And in the, how they take the school pictures and all the kids sit there and they're all smiling. And I thought in my mind, I went in there thinking that when I would see their class pictures, and they're in different grades, of course, that they would be probably the only two black kids in their class. And they're half white, right? And that's how it was when I was growing up. I was the only ethnic person in class, and I'm half white. So that's how white Idaho was. But wow, they were actually one of the only white kids in their class. And they're half black. Their class was filled with immigrants from Africa, very specifically from various different nations in Africa. But their class was filled. Both of their classes were filled with African refugees. And I was asking my cousin, where did all these kids come from? He says, oh, Congo, Uganda, there's some from Somalia, there's some, he's rattling it all off. And he lived in Africa for 3 years, my cousin, who's the uncle of these two boys. He was in the Peace Corps. So I was looking at this picture, and then I see all of these, of course, like Hispanic kids, and I see a couple of Asians in there that are maybe from like Bangladesh or something. It was the most diverse elementary school class I think I have ever seen in my life. And I live in California. I have nieces and nephews here in California. I see their school pictures. Their school pictures, when you look at it, is pretty much either the whole class is Hispanic, and then there's like my one little niece who's blonde, sitting there. And she's a quarter Vietnamese, but she doesn't look it at all. Or the class is predominantly Asian, right? So there's not a lot of diversity. They're actually quite separated. So you've got schools that are predominantly Asian. You have schools that are predominantly Hispanic. You have schools that are predominantly white. California, liberal California, is more segregated, I would say, than Boise, Idaho. So I'm looking at this picture, and these kids are all very, they're very dark from Africa. And my two little cousins, I guess they're my second cousins, or they're my first cousin's kids. So I don't know. What is that? First cousin once removed, I think. And they're mixed. So they're looking lighter than a lot of these other kids. So I was blown away by this, the diversity. And then I thought, well, because I haven't lived there in a long, long time, over 20 years. And I thought, well, but my sister was recently living in an apartment complex. And I remember now all of her neighbors were immigrants. They were refugees. So they were from Middle Eastern countries. Maybe a couple of the families that she lived around were from Africa, but majority, I think, in her neighborhood were from the Middle East. So this really struck me because when you visit Idaho, the one thing that every Idahoan will ask you, or they'll kind of imply, like if you don't say the term, if you don't say Boise correctly, if you say Boise, so there's no Z in Boise. So those of us who are born and raised in Boise, we know not to say Boise. That's not a thing. Somebody says that, they're an outsider. We're from Boise. So if somebody says Boise, people are like, where are you from? Right? People are really suspicious of you. They want to know, are you from California? And everybody in Idaho talks about those damn Californians. Those damn Californians coming in. And if you're in Boise and you show your California ID, which I have, because I live in California, I always have to give them the caveat. I was born and raised here. Because they kind of look at it and they'll kind of give a little like, another Californian coming in. So what really struck me after seeing these kids' classes, now I've known that the bigotry or the bias or the racism, whatever you want to call it, against Californians, I've known that that's existed since really I was going to school in Idaho. It was always, those Californians, we don't like those Californians. And it only got worse. And now we have a mass exodus of Californians flooding into Idaho. And so now there's even more of this, these Californians are coming, these Californians. So all you ever hear about when you're there, you never hear anybody in Idaho, it's supposed to be racist Idaho, right? Red state, Republican, racist Idaho. You never hear anyone, and I mean no one, says anything about those damn refugees, those damn immigrants. It is never talked about like that. My family were refugee they were refugees from Vietnam. I have a refugee Vietnamese family. But I get it. I look, I'm mixed, right? So some people don't see the Asian in me at all. And so they think they're maybe in safe company when they're around me, and they maybe could make a remark. But guess what? I never heard those remarks. You would think that I would hear those remarks. I just really didn't. I mean, people might ask like a really naive question about Vietnamese people and what Vietnamese people eat. There was always these rumors about Vietnamese people eating like dogs and stuff. So I kind of grew up around that sort of thing. Or I grew up around maybe once in a while the old Vietnam vet might make a remark here or there that, But for the most part, nobody ever said anything disparaging about me or my family. They were fascinated by my family. They thought they were, oh, that's so great. They come from Vietnam. Like they were very curious. And I find that is the case even now in Boise. When I was looking at this school class picture and I thought, that's when it hit me. It dawned on me that, no, this is exactly the point that many of us who are, you want to call us maybe populists, have been expressing this whole time. It comes down to the economy, stupid, right? That's what they say. It's the economy, stupid. And that's what it always comes down to. Our worst problem is not racism or bigotry or people just can't get along and accept one another. It's always economic and competition for economic resources. And that's the beef that the Idahoans have against the Californians. They don't have these beefs against the immigrants or the refugees. They never talk about that, ever. You never hear that uttered out of their mouths. Anyone in Idaho, these damn Mexicans coming, Africans coming in, Middle Easterners, never. They never say this. It's always the damn Californians. And the reason is because people leave California, they sell their single-family homes for $500,000 or now $1 million or even $2 million, depending on where you're coming from in the state. And we're talking your basic 3-bed, 2-bathroom house. And in LA, if you sell your house in Santa Monica, for example, that's even a 2-bed, 2-bath that was built in 1950, it is worth $2 million. So people sell these homes. They then go off to Idaho where the cost of living is cheap. They gobble up the homes that are there. Building is slow. There's a lack of labor. There's also an issue with lumber and supplies. And so they're not building fast enough. And so what is happening is there's skyrocketing inflation happening in Idaho. And this is happening all across the country in various little areas like Nashville, Charlotte, North Carolina, Austin, Texas. So you've got all of these exploding smaller cities where the residents, the people who've been born and raised there, can no longer compete, and they can no longer live in their own cities that they were born and raised in because somebody else comes in with a wad of cash and buys out their homes right from underneath them. The wages are the same, but it's about this other person coming in, and even if they're going to get a job that is going to be the same wage as somebody else in Idaho, the advantage is they've come with this massive nest egg. And then they buy out the homes in all the desirable areas, and then people like my family who were born and raised in Idaho have to move out to the sticks. There's now a new little town developing called Kuna that's right outside of Boise that everybody's moving to. Never in my life did I ever think anybody in my family would move all the way out to Kuna. I mean, it was way out there, and now everybody's moving to Kuna. So it's shoving people away. My dad's still hunkering down. He's still in Boise. He's refusing to leave, and he's refusing to leave even the side of town that he grew up in and that he's never left. He's lived on that side of town nearly his entire life, minus the time he was living on the farm when he was a kid growing up. But when he moved to Boise, he's lived on that side of town, and he's in his 70s now, and he doesn't want to be shoved all the way out to Kuna in the middle of nowhere. So where his, whole life would be disrupted, different friends, different bars, different, life, all that. So that is when I was there and I was looking at this extremely diverse elementary school, these 2 classes that were so diverse. And then I just was, this is what it comes down to, guys. It always boils down to the competition for the economic resources. This is why there was this, we don't want the Mexicans coming in. They're taking our jobs. It's the Mexicans. And now we know the Mexicans aren't the ones. It's the El Salvadorians and the Hondurans, right? They're the ones, and the Guatemalans, they're the ones coming to the border. And it's, we don't want them in our country. And it's not because people are racist. It is because they don't want to compete. They believe, even if it's a false notion, even if it's not the actual crux of the problem, although I do think the Californians coming into Idaho their wad of cash is actually the crux of that issue. Even if there's maybe some false ideas of what's really truly causing the inflation or the inaffordability of homes or things like that, or the inability to get a job, even if it's falsely placed, that is the backbone reason. The backbone reason is not because they're just racist against these others. That's not it. Because guess what? Californians are like pretty white, right? And so they're not the ones causing the diversity in Idaho. There's plenty of refugees flooding into the place. I looked around. I was just going shopping, even in the grocery stores, and I mean, it's extremely diverse in Idaho now. Extremely diverse, at least in Boise. Very, very diverse. And that's not the issue. It always boils down to the economics. So even when people are disparaging another group, and we see this even inside of the minority groups themselves, blacks, Hispanics, and Asians oftentimes are very racist against one another. Has nothing to do with white people. I mean, if white people just suddenly miraculously stop being bigoted overnight, like every single last white person stopped being a bigot today, and magically they just were like, let's just all sing, hold hands, and share and sing Kumbaya, you'd have this inner fighting amongst the minority groups. There would still be racism. It's just the racism coming from blacks against the Asians, or Asians against blacks, and Hispanics against Asians, or Hispanics against blacks, and vice versa, all this, right? So that reason why the minority groups are constantly at each other's throats, and always there's a lot of racism amongst the minority groups, it's not just a white person's problem, is not because, oh, they just hate these people with different color skin. It's that it's a competition for resources. People are trying to get what they can for themselves and the people like themselves, their family, their extended family, their neighbors, right? Their clan, their group, their people, their tribe. And they're trying to get those resources for those people. So that is, and always has been, the root of our problems. It comes down to economics. We have to solve the money problems. And if we solve the money problems, then a lot of these other issues where people are being bigoted towards one another, or saying hateful things, or committing acts of violence, or whatever it might be, a lot of that stuff goes away because people feel like they're thriving, they have opportunity, they're happy, right? Because they're getting their share of the economic resources that they feel like they need in order to live the American dream. And that's all anybody wants here. All the refugees that flood in, all the immigrants that come in, all the Californians that are coming into Idaho, the reason they're doing it is because they want the American dream, and they feel like wherever it was they came from, they couldn't have it, even inside of America. Right here in California, we don't feel like we can really have the American dream anymore. All of us, I think about leaving. I know we're thinking of leaving for sure. We can't actually build a life here. Buying a house that you could raise a family in, that you could have family gatherings in, because it's like big enough to have, maybe Thanksgiving. It's not a 2-bedroom condo. Those are things that people in places like California, and in places that are destitute, places in deep poverty, everybody's dreaming of the same thing. They're wanting that house, white picket fence. They want a 2-car garage. They want to be able to, maybe have a stay-at-home parent if they wanted, or, they definitely want to have a couple of family vacations each year where they go to the Grand Canyon, or they go to Times Square, or they go to Disneyland or Disney World or wherever. Maybe they splurge every 5 years and go to Europe, right? They want to have these opportunities. They want to be able to have backyard barbecues. They want to be able to send their kids to good schools, and the kids make lifelong friends, and they go to prom, and they take pictures, and then maybe they go off to college, or they go to trade school, or they take over some businesses, their parents' business, or whatever it is they might do. And they continue those lifelong friendships, and they're able to stay in their same communities that they grew up in with their best friends that they grew up with. That's what people want. And they're not able to have it. And so there's a lot of taking it out on everybody else, whether they be people from a different place, or maybe that have a slightly different culture, or people from a different state in the country, those damn Californians. And I'm sure in Florida, it's those damn New Yorkers. Those damn New Yorkers are coming. And they're taking all of our resources. So I think, when sometimes we get a little bit lost in the news, right? And there's this culture war that goes on, and both sides kind of get too much in the mud on this one, where the left is like, oh, it's just racism, and it's just a big distraction, giant distraction. They don't want you to really pay attention to the real problem. They want you to think, no, it's not the rich, it's not the elites, it's not your news media that's constantly keeping you afraid and fearing one another and each other. That's it. No, it's there. Your problem isn't them, the elites. The problem is you. You're the problem. You're the racist. You. And probably your neighbors. And that should be your number one concern, because when you walk out of your house today, I'm sure the one thing you're worried about is your racist neighbor. It's not about paying your bills. You'll be fine. That's not your problem. It's your racist neighbor. Okay. So for tonight, I'm going to have to, those of you watching on YouTube, here's the thing. I am being heavily, heavily censored. I am now on Facebook. Facebook has now eliminated my ability to post or comment on any page that is not mine. So they're allowing me to keep my page. This is how they're doing it now. This is the sinister, sneaky, censoring way that Facebook is operating these days. Rather than banning me completely, right, and removing my page, which causes a lot of controversy, and then people start screaming about it and they draw attention to it. What they're doing now instead, at least what they've done to me, is they've said to me, I can still have my page. I'm just not allowed to comment or post on anybody else's. Right, so if I see a posting from some other group or organization, media organization like BuzzFeed or something, I'm often commenting on their stuff, or Washington Post. Sometimes I get on there and comment, at some of just the insanity that they're posting, or Fox or whoever it might be. I have been flagged apparently by moderators, or just by the hyper sensitive people on Facebook, and they have flagged my comments. And they have now determined that I'm no longer allowed to comment or post in any other page, which is a problem for me in a lot of ways, because for one, some ways that this has affected me is my family has a group page. My family, the Iverson family, has a group page. And we needed to coordinate a lot of the information regarding this weekend and the funeral. And I was the person who actually planned the funeral and put together the celebration of life. I was the coordinator for all of it. And because Facebook decided at the most inopportune time for me during this weekend, so I don't know what the comment was, or, I hadn't been active on Facebook for a few days because I was very busy with all of the planning. But, they're always a little slow to, it could have been something from September for all I know. And they decided to give me the notification this weekend while I was in the middle of trying to get everybody the information they needed for the funeral, for a family funeral. Think about this. Family funeral that I planned, and I was unable to post on my Iverson family group page because Facebook decided to limit my activity because they said that I had gone against their community guidelines. What those community guidelines are, I don't know. I would imagine something that obviously has to do with, the plethora of topics that they've decided to limit the conversation on, that they've decided to maintain a one narrative on. You have to stick with the establishment narrative. I don't know which one of those. There's many, that I maybe commented on, probably the pandemic stuff. I don't know. But they decided that I could no longer post. So I couldn't even get the information out to my own family about the funeral. I also am in a couple of groups about the tech. We use some tech for this show. And in order to get answers, a lot of times these Facebook groups are really helpful because you can go on the group and then you can ask questions, and all these people who are using the same software and the same systems and same equipment as you could then answer, and it's really, really helpful. I have now been banned. I'm unable to even post or ask questions on those pages. But the most egregious to me was the fact that I couldn't even post to my own family, about my uncle's funeral, because Facebook decided that I had somehow, some way violated their community standards. And rather than removing my page, which is what they'd been doing to everybody else, for a while, but they're getting so much heat about it, now they're just limiting my activity. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. They're just limiting activity. You could post on your own page, but you're not going to be able to post on anyone else's, which means you can't grow. right? You can't bring in people when you post on other people's pages, and then other people see your comment and then they want to follow your page, right? That's kind of how communities grow. That's how pages grow. They're not letting that happen. And I'm positive that they're probably not even sharing my posts, even to the people who follow my page. They're probably instead just censoring them, they're shadow banning them. And so the only people who see my posts are now the people who actually go to my page to see what I've had to say. That's what's happening now. That's what's happening. So Facebook has now limited me. I can still write up stuff, and I often use Facebook. I use Facebook and I use Locals, but a lot of times I use Facebook just because there's all of these like random people, not people who just really like me, but there's also these people that really, really hate me. And so I post on Facebook so that I can see the comments that they make to kind of counter what I'm saying, so that I can, sometimes people make a good point. And a lot of times they don't, but sometimes they do. And so I like to see that good point so that I can kind of work that into my thinking about whatever the subject is. So I use Facebook for that reason. And, but yeah, that is what's going on now with Facebook. This is the world we're living in now, is censoring, limiting. You just can't say anything that they don't want you to say. And over the weekend, I also noticed that Brett Weinstein, and, he is being heavily, YouTube is really going after him hard. He interviews scientists that are heavily credentialed, that really know their stuff, and yet that is considered medical misinformation. Science is now, from scientists, is now not science, fake science from actual science. That is the world we're living in. So that being said, those of you watching on YouTube right now, I'm going to need you to move right now to Rockfin for the rest of tonight's show, or to Vimeo, because the next couple of topics I have, I cannot do on YouTube without potentially being struck down with a rod of lightning. I'm going to talk tonight about the NFL, and the NFL has announced their new rules for the two different groups of people who've made different choices with their health. And we're going to talk about that. Sorry, my allergies, by the way, are really acting up coming back from Idaho. Idaho, I just get hit with allergies. And so I'm a little bit feeling allergic at the moment, but we're going to get through this. So, and I didn't get in until really, really late last night, like 2 a.m. So we're going to talk about the NFL and the new rules that they've announced. We're also going to be talking about some new options that are coming, that potentially might be coming out for those who are feeling hesitant, and how there might be some good news on that front for those who are feeling a little hesitant. So I'm going to explain the differences and why, from everything I've read, and why this new thing, and I have to be very coded, I'm sorry with my language, but this new thing that is coming out, why it might actually be a pretty viable and good option for those who are hesitant. And this also gives you the ammunition, in a lot of ways, when people say, well, what's wrong with you, you anti-science person? You can say, well, this is the stuff that's there that we've got, and this is the stuff that's coming, and this is why I'm going to wait for the stuff that's coming, because it's different than the stuff we've got, and I'm going to give you that ammunition. Also, I'm going to tell you some stories from people in my inner circle who made choices regarding their health that have now they've seen some pretty serious repercussions, and we're going to be talking about that as well, but not on YouTube. So I am going to take a 2-minute break. I'm going to let those of you who need to head over to Rockfin or Vimeo, the links are down below to catch the rest of this. If you do not want to go to Rockfin or Vimeo right now, the rest of this will be posted on my Locals community. So Locals is also a great place to go for all of this content. I do post all the stuff I'm not allowed to post anywhere else on Locals, and that link is down below as well. And that is also the best way to support this show. If you'd like to support this show, Locals is the place to do that. It's like $5 a month, and you support my independent media journey here. So go to Locals. But right now, if you want to catch the rest of this live stream, then go to Rockfin, go to Vimeo. Those links are down below, and you can watch the rest of this, because what we've got to talk about for the rest of the night is very important stuff. So 2 minutes. Those of you who are on Rockfin and Vimeo right now, give me 2 minutes. I'll be back. And I will see you guys then. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Head over to Rockfin and Vimeo. Give me 2 minutes.